The email notification chimed on Rebecca Hart's phone at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of late night when desperation makes you check messages you'd normally ignore. She sat in the cramped living room of her sister's apartment, where she and her 10-year-old daughter Lily had been crashing for the past 6 weeks, ever since the eviction notice made their previous arrangement impossible. Maritime auction alert. Final reduction. Salvage vessel, Iron Duchess. Reserve lowered to $1. Rebecca read it 3 times, certain she'd misunderstood. She'd been monitoring marine salvage auctions for months, not because she had any real hope of buying anything, but because it let her dream about the life she used to have before Marcus left, before the business collapsed, before medical bills from Lily's emergency appendectomy wiped out what little savings remained. She clicked through to the listing. The photographs loaded slowly on her cracked phone screen, revealing something that looked less like a boat and more like a monument to failure. The Iron Duchess sat half-submerged in a Portland shipyard basin, her hull tilted at a 15-degree angle that screamed structural compromise. Rust bloomed across every surface like some kind of maritime plague. The superstructure listed dangerously to port. Windows gaped empty and dark. But Rebecca saw something else beneath the decay. She saw a World War II tanker, the kind they'd built by the hundreds during wartime when speed mattered more than elegance. She saw riveted steel construction, the kind that lasted if you knew what you were doing. She saw wide beam and deep draft, bones that were solid even if everything else had rotted away. The listing details were brutally honest. 1943 T2 tanker, 523 feet overall length, 68 feet beam. Partially flooded, engine room compromised, navigation equipment salvaged, sold as is for scrap value only. No warranties, no guarantees. Buyer responsible for all removal and disposal costs. Starting bid, $1. Current bid, $1. Auction closes in 16 hours. Rebecca's marine engineering degree, the one she'd earned before Lily was born, before she'd taken the corporate job that promised stability but delivered downsizing, whispered that this was insane. A flooded tanker was a liability, not an asset. The cost to pump it out, repair the hull, make it seaworthy again would run into hundreds of thousands, maybe millions. But that same degree also told her something else. T2 tankers were built with compartmentalized hulls, dozens of separate watertight sections designed so that damage to one area wouldn't sink the whole ship. If the Iron Duchess was only partially flooded, that meant some compartments were still sealed, still dry, still intact after 80 years. And sometimes people hid things in sealed compartments. Her sister Amanda appeared in the doorway, hair wrapped in a towel, judgment already forming on her face before she'd even spoken. Still looking at those boat listings? Becky, you need to focus on finding real work, not chasing fantasies. I have real work, Rebecca said, not looking up from her phone. The Port Authority hired me for dock inspections. It's just contract work, but it's something. Contract work that pays $18 an hour with no benefits while you have a daughter to support, Amanda shot back. You're a marine engineer. You should be working for a shipping company or an offshore platform, making real money. I sent out 47 applications last month, Rebecca said, her voice carefully level. 3 companies bothered to respond, all rejections. Turns out being a 38-year-old woman with a 7-year gap in your resume because you were raising a kid doesn't make you competitive. Amanda sighed, the sound heavy with the particular exhaustion that comes from helping family you're not sure you should still be helping. How much longer are you planning to stay here? As long as you'll let us, Rebecca admitted. I'm trying, Amanda. I'm looking for apartments, but everything in this city requires first month, last month security deposit, and proof of income at 3 times the rent. I don't have that kind of money. Maybe you should move somewhere cheaper, somewhere with lower cost of living, and leave the only job market where my skills mean anything, the only place where maritime work exists. Rebecca shook her head. I just need time. Time to save up, time to build up my reputation again, time to what? Amanda interrupted. Time to magically fix everything? Becky, you're living in my spare room with your daughter, working a job that barely covers your phone bill and Lily's school supplies. At some point, you need to accept reality and make practical decisions. Rebecca looked at the listing on her phone, at the rusted hulk of a ship that everyone had given up on, at the $1 starting bid that said this thing had so little value that no one else had even bothered to compete for it. "What if I told you I was thinking about buying a boat?" she said quietly. Amanda stared at her. "Please tell me you're joking." "There's an auction closing tomorrow. A salvage tanker for $1. A salvage tanker," Amanda repeated slowly, like she was talking to someone who'd just suggested investing in oceanfront property on Mars. "A boat that needs to be salvaged. For $1. And you think this is somehow a good idea?" "I think it's a possibility," Rebecca said. "I think it's something I actually know how to evaluate. Unlike corporate jobs, where I'm competing with people 10 years younger and twice as connected. It's a money pit," Amanda said flatly. "Even I know that much. Ships that cheap are cheap for a reason. You'd spend everything you have just to make it float, let alone make it useful." "Maybe," Rebecca acknowledged. "Or maybe everyone's overlooked it because they don't understand what they're seeing. T2 tankers were built to last. The hull construction alone." "I don't care about hull construction," Amanda interrupted. "I care about my sister and my niece living in my apartment indefinitely because you're chasing dreams instead of building stability. You want to help yourself? Get a real job. Find a cheap apartment. Stop pretending you're going to magically find some treasure ship that solves all your problems." The words hit harder than Amanda probably intended, mostly because they echoed the doubts Rebecca had been fighting for months. She wasn't special. She wasn't lucky. She was just another struggling single mother with skills the market didn't value and debts she couldn't pay. But she was also an engineer who could read a ship's lines and see possibilities other people missed. After Amanda went to bed, Rebecca pulled up everything she could find about the Iron Duchess. The research took hours, jumping from maritime registries to Coast Guard reports to historical archives that documented World War II vessel construction. The Iron Duchess had been built in 1943 at the California Shipbuilding Corporation, one of hundreds of T2 tankers mass-produced to fuel the Allied war effort. She'd serve in the Pacific, running petroleum products from refineries to forward bases, surviving kamikaze attacks and typhoons that sank lesser vessels. After the war, she'd been sold to commercial interests, converted for civilian cargo operations, and worked trade routes for another 40 years before obsolescence caught up with her. By the 1990s, she was too old, too slow, too inefficient to compete with modern tankers. She'd changed hands multiple times, each owner using her for progressively less prestigious work until she ended up in Portland, stripped of anything valuable, and left to rot in a shipyard basin when her final owner went bankrupt. The Coast Guard reports from her final years showed multiple violations, safety concerns, and recommendations for retirement. But they also showed something interesting. Her hull integrity had been rated as satisfactory as recently as 5 years ago. The structure was sound, even if everything else had degraded. Rebecca found a historical society forum where maritime enthusiasts discussed T2 tankers, sharing photographs and specifications and stories about the ships that had helped win the war. One thread caught her attention. User Maritime Historian 47 had posted, "The T2 design included secure storage compartments that weren't on the official blueprints. Spaces built into the hull structure where valuable cargo could be hidden during wartime. Most were eventually discovered and removed, but some vessels still have sealed compartments that were forgotten when the ships were decommissioned." Someone had replied, "Urban legend. Those compartments are documented in the construction records." But Maritime Historian 47 insisted, "Not all of them. I've personally examined 3 different T2 hulls and found spaces that shouldn't exist according to the blueprints. Small voids, maybe 6 by 8 feet, built into the structure between the cargo tanks and the outer hull. Perfect for hiding high-value materials being shipped to war zones." Rebecca sat back, heart hammering. Hidden compartments, sealed spaces, places where something valuable might have been stored and then forgotten when the ship changed hands over and over during 80 years of service. It was a long shot. It was probably nothing. But what if it wasn't? She checked her bank account. $1,247.63. Everything she had left in the world. Enough to place a bid, pay the minimal auction fees, and have a little left over for the immediate costs of dealing with whatever she'd bought. Not enough to make this smart. Not even close. But maybe enough to make it possible. At 6 a.m., Lily padded into the living room in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Mama, why are you still awake?" Rebecca closed her laptop, suddenly aware that she'd been researching all night, that dawn light was starting to filter through Amanda's apartment windows, that she'd made a decision somewhere around 3 a.m. that she couldn't quite bring herself to regret. "Couldn't sleep, baby. Too much on my mind." Lily climbed onto the couch beside her, small and warm and trusting in a way that made Rebecca's chest ache. "Aunt Amanda says we might need to move again soon." "She said that to you?" "I heard her on the phone," Lily admitted, "telling someone that we've been here too long, that she needs her space back." "Are we going to be homeless again, Mama?" "We were never homeless," Rebecca said, pulling her daughter close even though the technicality felt hollow. Living in their car for 2 weeks while waiting for this arrangement with Amanda counted as homeless in every way that mattered. "And no, baby, we're going to figure something out." "Ow, I don't know yet," Rebecca said honestly. She'd always tried not to lie to Lily, even when the truth was scary. "But I'm working on it. I promise." "I miss having our own place," Lily said quietly. "I miss my room. I miss being able to be loud without worrying about bothering Aunt Amanda. I miss feeling like we belonged somewhere." "Me too, baby. Me too." The auction closed at noon. Rebecca watched the countdown on her phone while pretending to review inspection reports at her desk at the Port Authority. Her supervisor had already given her a warning about personal phone use during work hours, but she couldn't help herself. At 11:58, someone placed a bid of $50. Rebecca's stomach dropped. Of course someone else had seen the value. Of course, she wasn't the only person paying attention. She entered $100, the most she could risk and still have enough for basic survival. The other bidder countered with $150. Rebecca bid $250, hands shaking. The other bidder went to $300. Rebecca stared at the screen, calculating rapidly. If she bid higher and won, she'd have less than $1,000 left for everything else. Fuel to get to the shipyard. Equipment rentals to access the hull. Food and basic necessities while she figured out her next move. But if she didn't bid, she'd be exactly where she was now. Trapped, broke, dependent on her sister's diminishing patience, and a job that would never pay enough to change anything. At 11:59, she bid $500. The screen refreshed. No counterbid. At 12 p.m. exactly, the auction closed. "Congratulations," the screen announced. "You are the winning bidder for lot number 374, Salvage vessel, Iron Duchess. Please remit payment within 48 hours to finalize the sale." Rebecca stared at the message until her supervisor appeared at her desk, asking if she was feeling all right, mentioning that she looked pale. She mumbled something about low blood sugar and took an early lunch, walking to the waterfront and sitting on a bench that overlooked the Columbia River. She just spent $500, more than a third of everything she had, on a partially sunken World War II tanker that might be completely worthless. Amanda was going to kill her. But beneath the fear and the second-guessing, Rebecca felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Excitement. Purpose. The electric thrill of believing she might have seen something everyone else had missed. She called the auction house and arranged payment. The clerk who processed her credit card sounded bored, like selling derelict ships for pocket change was just another Tuesday transaction. "Buyer assumes all liability," the clerk recited mechanically. "Vessel must be removed from current location within 90 days or additional storage fees apply. No refunds, no warranties, no guarantees of any kind. Do you understand and accept these terms?" "Understand," Rebecca said. "Then congratulations on your purchase. You'll receive the title and access documentation within 3 business days. Have a nice day." The call disconnected, leaving Rebecca sitting on a waterfront bench, officially the owner of a 523-foot rust bucket that everyone with any sense had wisely avoided. She texted Amanda, "We need to talk when you get home." The response came immediately. "If this is about needing more time, I'm sorry, Becky, but I really can't. It's not that, Rebecca interrupted. I did something. Something that might be really stupid or might be really smart. I honestly don't know yet. What did you do? Rebecca hesitated, then typed, I bought a boat. Her phone rang immediately. Rebecca let it go to voicemail, not ready for the conversation she knew was coming. Amanda called again, then a third time. Finally, Rebecca answered. Please tell me you're joking, Amanda said, her voice tight with a particular kind of anger that came from caring about someone who kept making decisions you couldn't understand. Please tell me you did not actually spend money on a boat when you're living in my spare room and can barely afford groceries. I spent $500, Rebecca said. On a tanker A tanker. Amanda's voice climbed an octave. Not even a regular boat, but a commercial tanker? Becky, what the hell were you thinking? I was thinking that I'm a marine engineer who can evaluate vessels better than most people bidding on salvage auctions, Rebecca said, anger rising to match her sister's. I was thinking that everyone else looked at this ship and saw scrap metal, but I see something they missed. What could you possibly see that's worth $500 you don't have? Possibility, Rebecca said. A chance. Something that might actually change our situation instead of just perpetuating it. You know what changes situations? Amanda shot back. Stable employment. Reasonable decisions. Not gambling what little money you have on derelict ships that are probably going to cost you thousands more in dock fees and disposal costs. You're right, Rebecca said quietly. It might cost me everything I have left, but what I have left right now isn't enough anyway. Isn't enough to rent an apartment. Isn't enough to give Lily stability. Isn't enough to stop being a burden on you. So, I'm taking a chance on something I actually understand. Silence stretched between them, crackling with tension and disappointment and the particular pain of family who want different things for each other. When can I see it? Amanda finally asked, her voice flat. I get access in 3 days. Fine, we'll go look at your boat. And when it turns out to be exactly the disaster I think it is, we're going to have a serious conversation about practical next steps. Deal. Deal. Rebecca agreed, though she had no intention of giving up that easily. She picked up Lily from school that afternoon, and they walked to the public library where internet was free and they could sit for hours without anyone bothering them. While Lily did homework at a corner table, Rebecca pulled up everything she could find about T2 tanker construction, focusing specifically on hull design and compartmentalization. The technical specifications were impressive. T2 tankers had been built with double-bottom construction, spaces between the inner and outer hull that provided both structural support and protection against puncture. They'd also included numerous watertight compartments, cofferdams between cargo tanks, void spaces for ballast and stability. But the forum post from Maritime historian 47 kept nagging at her. Hidden compartments that weren't on the official blueprints. Spaces built into the structure where valuable cargo could be concealed. She found a digitized copy of the original construction plans for California Shipbuilding Corporation T2 tankers, dated 1943. The blueprints showed every major structural element: keel, frames, decks, bulkheads, cargo tanks, machinery spaces. But Rebecca had spent enough time reading ship plans to know that what was documented wasn't always what existed. Modifications happened during construction. Spaces got added or changed. And in wartime, when ships were being built at breakneck speed and secrecy mattered, official documentation didn't always match reality. She started searching for declassified military documents about valuable cargo shipments during World War II. What kinds of materials have been so important that they needed special protection during transit? Gold bullion for paying troops and securing alliances in the Pacific. Platinum for aircraft manufacturing and ammunition production. Rare earth minerals for radar and electronics. Classified research materials and prototypes. Currency plates for printing occupation money. All of it would have been vulnerable during shipping, subject to theft, enemy action, or simple loss during the chaos of war. All of it would have justified secret storage compartments that weren't documented in public records. Rebecca found a reference to a 1944 incident where $50 million in platinum ingots had been loaded onto a T2 tanker in San Francisco bound for Pacific War Industries, only to arrive with $3 million missing. The official report blamed clerical error in initial inventory, but reading between the lines, Rebecca suspected something else: theft, misrouting, or deliberate concealment. The Iron Duchess had been built in 1943. She'd served Pacific routes during the final years of the war. She'd been in exactly the right place at exactly the right time to have transported high-value cargo that might have been hidden in compartments no one remembered existed. It was speculation. It was hope built on fragments and possibilities. But Rebecca had learned that sometimes the difference between opportunity and failure was simply being willing to look where others hadn't bothered searching. "Mama," Lily appeared beside her, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Can we go? I'm hungry." Rebecca checked the time. 6:15 p.m. They'd been at the library for 3 hours. "Sure, baby. Let's see what we can make for dinner." They walked back to Amanda's apartment through Portland streets that were starting to fill with evening commuters. Lily chattered about her day, about a science project she was excited about a friend who'd invited her to a birthday party next weekend. Rebecca listened with half her attention while the other half calculated costs and possibilities. If the Iron Duchess really did have hidden compartments, if those compartments held something valuable, if she could access them before the 90-day deadline to remove the vessel from the shipyard. Too many ifs, too much uncertainty, but also, for the first time in months, something that felt like hope. The title documents arrived by courier on Friday afternoon. Rebecca signed for the thick envelope with hands that trembled slightly, aware that what she held represented either the beginning of something extraordinary or confirmation that she'd made a catastrophic mistake. Inside were official transfer papers, the vessel registration showing Rebecca Hart as the new owner of the Iron Duchess, and a letter from the shipyard manager informing her that she had access to the vessel starting immediately, with a 90-day removal clock beginning the moment she took possession. Amanda watched from the kitchen doorway as Rebecca spread the documents across the coffee table. "So it's real. You actually own a tanker." "I actually own a tanker," Rebecca confirmed, still not quite believing it herself. "And you have a plan for what comes next?" Rebecca met her sister's eyes. "I need to inspect the hull, assess the damage, determine if it's salvageable. Then I need to figure out pumping costs, repair estimates, and whether there's any value in the vessel beyond scrap metal." "In 90 days, Amanda said flatly. "In 90 days, Rebecca agreed. "With no money, no equipment, and no crew." "I have some money," Rebecca protested. "Almost $700 left." Amanda's laugh was bitter. $700 to salvage a 500-foot tanker. "Becky, do you have any idea how insane that sounds?" "Yes," Rebecca said simply. "I know exactly how insane it sounds. But I also know that I'm out of safe options. Every reasonable choice I've made for the past 3 years has led to the exact situation I'm in now: broke, dependent, and running out of time. So maybe insane is exactly what I need." Lily emerged from the bedroom, where she'd been pretending not to listen to the adults arguing. "Can I see the boat, Mama? Can we go look at it?" Rebecca glanced at Amanda, who shrugged with the particular resignation of someone who'd given up trying to reason with family. "Might as well. At least then you'll know what you actually bought." They drove to the shipyard the next morning, all 3 of them crammed into Rebecca's aging Honda that burned oil and made concerning noises whenever she accelerated too quickly. The shipyard sat on the Portland waterfront, a sprawling complex of docks, cranes, and industrial buildings that smelled like diesel fuel and rust and the particular decay of maritime equipment past its prime. The guard at the entrance checked Rebecca's paperwork, gave her a visitor's badge, and directed her to Basin 7, where the Iron Duchess waited. "Can't miss it," he said with a smirk. "It's the one that's sinking." They parked near a row of cargo containers and walked toward the waterfront. Other vessels crowded the basin: barges, tugboats, fishing trawlers in various states of repair or abandonment. But even among the derelict, the Iron Duchess stood out. She was massive. Rebecca had known the specifications: 523 feet long, 68 feet wide, but seeing those numbers translated into actual steel was overwhelming. The tanker dominated the basin, her hull rising from the water like a wall of rust-streaked metal. The starboard side sat lower than the port, giving the entire vessel a drunken tilt that immediately identified structural compromise. The superstructure rose toward the stern, 5 stories of crew quarters and bridge equipment that had once housed the ship's operational heart. Windows gaped empty. The smokestack listed at an angle that suggested internal supports had failed. Paint peeled in sheets, revealing bare metal beneath that had oxidized into abstract patterns of orange and brown decay. "Oh my God," Amanda breathed. "Becky, this thing is huge." T2 tankers were the workhorses of the war effort, Rebecca said, her engineer's mind automatically cataloging details. They built them fast and built them tough. This hull has survived 80 years, including combat conditions. The structure is solid, even if everything else looks terrible. "It looks like it's sinking," Amanda pointed out. "Partially flooded," Rebecca corrected. "Probably the engine room and maybe some cargo holds. But see how the bow is still riding high? That means forward compartments are intact. The hull is compartmentalized. Damage to one section doesn't compromise the whole vessel." Lily walked to the edge of the dock, staring up at the towering hull. "It's like a castle. A rusty castle on the water." Rebecca approached the access gangway, a rickety metal structure that connected the dock to the main deck. A sign warned, "Unsafe vessel. Enter at own risk. And liability assumed." "You're not seriously thinking about going on board," Amanda said. "I'm the owner," Rebecca replied. "I need to inspect my property." "Your property is a death trap." "Then I'll be careful." Rebecca turned to Lily. "Baby, you stay here with Aunt Amanda. I'm just going to look around, make sure it's safe." "I want to come with you," Lily protested. "Not until I know the deck won't collapse under our weight." "Give me 30 minutes, okay?" Rebecca climbed the gangway, testing each step before committing her weight. The metal groaned, but held. At the top, she stepped onto the main deck and immediately understood why the auction listing had been so dire. The deck was a maze of equipment, pipes, hatches, and structural elements that had once served specific purposes but now existed as monuments to abandonment. Cargo tank access points gaped open to the sky, their covers long since removed or stolen. The deck plating showed signs of corrosion, some areas eaten through entirely, creating holes that dropped into darkness below. But Rebecca's trained eye saw past the surface damage. The main structural beams looked solid. The frame was intact. This wasn't a ship that had been destroyed by catastrophic failure. It was a ship that had been allowed to rot through neglect. She made her way forward, stepping carefully around weak points, until she reached the bow. From here, she could see the full length of the vessel stretching behind her, a football field and a half of steel that had once carried fuel oil across oceans while bombs and torpedoes threatened from every direction. The forward cargo tank's access hatch sat nearby, sealed with corrosion but intact. Rebecca pulled a crowbar from her belt. She'd come prepared with basic tools, and wedged it into the hatch's edge, applying leverage until the seal broke with a shriek of protesting metal. The hatch lifted, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. Rebecca pulled out her flashlight and shone it down. The beam caught on metal rungs, intact and surprisingly clean, leading down maybe 20 feet to what should have been a cargo tank floor. She descended carefully, counting rungs, testing each one before trusting it with her weight. At the bottom, her boots hit solid metal that rang with the particular sound of empty, sealed space. She was standing inside a cargo tank that should have been flooded if the ship was taking on water, but the floor was dry, completely dry. Rebecca swept her flashlight around the space. The tank was enormous, maybe 40 feet across, extending forward and aft beyond her light's reach. The walls showed rust and age, but no active corrosion, no seeping water, no signs of structural failure. This compartment was intact, sealed, exactly what she'd hoped to find. She walked the perimeter, examining the walls, looking for anything unusual. The T2 design called for cargo tanks separated by cofferdams, empty spaces that prevented different fuel types from contaminating each other. Those cofferdams were typically 6 to 8 feet wide, running the full height of the cargo area. But as Rebecca traced the forward wall of this tank, Her flashlight caught something that didn't match the blueprint she'd studied. The wall curved slightly where it should have been flat, creating a subtle bulge that suggested additional space beyond. She pressed her hand against the metal, feeling for temperature differences that might indicate hidden voids. The bulge area felt cooler than the surrounding wall, which could mean an air gap, a space that wasn't heated by the ambient temperature of the cargo tank. Rebecca pulled out the measuring tape she'd brought and started documenting dimensions. According to the original blueprints, this cargo tank should be 42 feet wide. But when she measured from port to starboard, she got 40 feet. 2 feet missing. 2 feet of space that existed in the blueprints, but not in the physical reality of the tank she was standing in. Hidden space. Exactly what Maritime Historian 47 had described. Her heart hammered as she examined the curved wall more carefully, looking for access points, hatches, anything that would allow entry to whatever existed beyond. The wall appeared solid, riveted steel with no obvious openings. But T2 tankers have been built with maintenance access in mind. Every space needed some way to inspect, repair, or modify it during the ship's service life. If there was hidden space here, there had to be a way to reach it. Rebecca worked methodically, tapping the wall with her crowbar, listening for changes in tone that might indicate hollow sections or access panels concealed by decades of paint and corrosion. She worked her way from floor to ceiling, as high as she could reach, covering every square foot of the curved section. It took 40 minutes before she found it. A section of wall about 3 feet square that sounded distinctly different when struck. Hollow, or at least less solid than the surrounding steel. She scraped away corrosion with her crowbar, revealing rivet patterns that didn't quite match the rest of the wall. These rivets looked newer, or at least had been installed differently, with heads that protruded slightly more than standard construction would dictate. Rebecca positioned her crowbar under one rivet head and pulled. The rivet resisted, then suddenly popped free with a crack that echoed through the empty tank. She worked the next rivet, then the next, her hands cramping from the effort, but adrenaline keeping her moving. After 20 minutes and a dozen rivets removed, the panel shifted. Rebecca wedged her crowbar into the gap and pulled. The panel swung outward on hinges that had been concealed by the rivet heads, revealing darkness beyond. She shone her flashlight through the opening. The beam revealed a space about 6 feet wide and 8 feet tall, running lengthwise along the cargo tank. The floor was metal decking, clean and dry. The walls were bare steel, but along one side sat a row of metal containers, military-style storage boxes, each one about 3 feet long and marked with stencil codes that had faded but were still partially legible. Rebecca's breath caught. This was it. This was exactly what she'd hoped existed but hadn't quite dared to believe. She squeezed through the opening into the hidden compartment, her flashlight sweeping across the storage boxes. There were 12 of them, stacked in 2 rows, each one sealed with clasps that had corroded but remained intact. The stencil markings on the nearest box read, USN, classified, do not open without a UTH. United States Navy, classified materials, stored in a hidden compartment that had been sealed for 80 years. Rebecca's hands shook as she reached for the first box's clasps. They resisted, frozen by time and corrosion, but she worked them patiently until they gave way. The lid lifted, hinges creaking, revealing contents that made her forget to breathe. The box was filled with metal ingots, each one roughly the size of a brick, stacked in precise rows. The metal had a distinctive silver-white luster that even 80 years of storage couldn't fully tarnish. Rebecca pulled out one ingot, surprised by its weight, maybe 20 pounds in an object the size of her hand. She wiped the surface with her sleeve, revealing stamped markings. PT.9995, U.S. Treasury, 1944. Platinum, .999, 5 purity. U.S. Treasury marked. Dated 1944. She set the ingot down with trembling hands and pulled out her phone, searching for current platinum prices. The screen loaded slowly in the poor signal of the ship's interior, but finally displayed the information she needed. Platinum trading at $1,100 per ounce. Rebecca did rapid mental math. If each ingot weighed 20 pounds, that was roughly 320 ounces. At $1,100 per ounce, each ingot was worth approximately $352,000. And there were at least 30 ingots visible in this one box. She opened the second box with hands that could barely grip the clasps. More ingots, identical to the first box. The third box, same. Fourth, fifth, sixth, all filled with platinum ingots bearing U.S. Treasury stamps. Rebecca stopped counting after the eighth box, her mind unable to process the implications. She was looking at hundreds of ingots, thousands of pounds of platinum that had been hidden in this compartment since World War II and forgotten when the ship changed hands over and over during decades of commercial service. Conservative estimate, if she was seeing 200 ingots total, $70 million in platinum. If there were more boxes she hadn't opened yet, easily over $100 million. Possibly much more. She sat down hard on the metal decking, flashlight still clutching in one hand, surrounded by enough wealth to solve every problem she'd ever had, every debt, every night lying awake worrying about Lily's future, every humiliation of depending on Amanda's charity. All of it sitting in a hidden compartment on a ship she'd bought for $500. Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "You've been gone an hour. Everything okay?" She stared at the message, trying to formulate a response that wouldn't sound completely insane. "Found something. Need more time. Don't worry." The response came immediately. "What did you find?" Rebecca looked at the boxes of platinum, at the fortune hidden in a space that officially didn't exist, at proof that her engineering instincts and desperate hope had led her to something extraordinary. Possibility, she typed back. "I found possibility." She spent another 2 hours in the hidden compartment, documenting everything. She photographed each box from multiple angles, cataloged the serial numbers on ingots, measured dimensions, counted quantities. Her phone storage filled with evidence of what she discovered. The final count was staggering. 12 boxes total, averaging 30 ingots per box, approximately 360 ingots of platinum at roughly $350,000 each. $126 million in platinum, hidden for 80 years, now legally hers because she'd been desperate enough and crazy enough to buy a ship everyone else had given up on. When Rebecca finally emerged from the cargo tank, climbing back up the ladder to the main deck, the sun was setting over Portland. Amanda and Lily stood at the gangway, the latter looking worried, the former furious. 3 hours, Amanda said as Rebecca approached. "You were down there for 3 hours without any communication about whether you were safe or—" She stopped, studying Rebecca's face. "What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Not a ghost," Rebecca said quietly. "More like the answer to a prayer I didn't quite have the courage to pray." Rebecca didn't tell them about the platinum. Not yet. Not standing on a public dock where anyone could overhear. Not when she hadn't had time to think through the implications. Not when the discovery was so enormous that speaking it aloud felt like it might somehow make it disappear. "I found sealed compartments," she said carefully. "Intact spaces that suggest the hull is in better condition than the exterior indicates. I need to do more comprehensive assessment, but I think this vessel might actually be salvageable." Amanda's expression suggested she didn't believe this suddenly optimistic evaluation, but Lily's face lit up with excitement. "Really, Mama? We can fix the boat." "Maybe, baby. I need to bring in some equipment, do proper surveys, but yes, maybe we can fix the boat." The drive back to Amanda's apartment was quiet, Rebecca's mind racing through logistics and complications. The platinum was legally hers. She owned the vessel and everything on it. But claiming ownership and actually securing $126 million in precious metals were vastly different propositions. She needed help, professional help, legal help, and she needed to move fast before anyone else figured out what she'd found. That night, after Lily fell asleep and Amanda retreated to her bedroom with pointed comments about needing space, Rebecca sat at the kitchen table with her laptop and started making lists. Immediate priorities: secure the vessel. Document everything legally. Find buyers for the platinum. Protect herself and Lily. Complications: the shipyard would want the Iron Duchess removed within 90 days. Moving a partially flooded 523-foot tanker required resources she didn't have. If she tried to salvage the Platinum publicly, word would spread, and people who felt entitled to a share would emerge from everywhere. She needed discretion, she needed expertise, and she needed someone she could trust. Rebecca pulled up her old college contacts, scrolling through names of people she hadn't spoken to in years. Most had moved on to successful careers with major shipping companies or offshore operations. Few would remember her, and fewer still would take her seriously given her current circumstances. But one name stood out, David Chun. They'd studied together at Maritime Academy, and he'd gone into marine salvage operations, working for a company that specialized in recovering valuable cargo from wrecked or abandoned vessels. If anyone would understand the legal and practical complexities of what she'd found, it was David. She found his email through his company's website and spent an hour crafting a message that conveyed urgency without revealing too much detail. David, Rebecca Hart from Portland Maritime Academy. I know it's been years, but I need advice on a salvage situation. I've acquired a World War II T2 tanker and discovered materials on board that have significant value. Need to discuss legal claim procedures and secure extraction. Can we talk? Urgent. She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then forced herself to close the laptop and try to sleep. The response came at 6:47 a.m. Rebecca, of course I remember you. T2 tanker salvage? That's interesting. I'm in Seattle, but can drive down tomorrow if this is as urgent as you suggest. What kind of materials are we talking about? Rebecca typed quickly, rather discuss in person. Tomorrow works. I can meet you at the vessel. Send me the location. I'll be there by noon. She spent Sunday morning alone on the Iron Duchess, this time bringing proper equipment. Industrial flashlights, cameras, measuring tools, a portable generator, and work lights. She told Amanda she was doing structural assessment, which was technically true, just not the whole truth. The hidden compartment looked even more surreal in proper lighting. The boxes of platinum gleamed under her work lamps, their military markings stark against the aged metal. Rebecca photographed everything from multiple angles, then began the painstaking work of documenting each ingot serial number. The numbers followed a pattern: PT 1944, USN followed by a sequential identifier. She was up to ingot PT 1944, USN 237 when she noticed something odd. One box at the back of the compartment sat slightly apart from the others, marked differently. Instead of the standard classification stamps, this box bore only a single word: Sentinel. Rebecca worked the corroded clasps until they released. The lid opened to reveal not platinum ingots, but documents. Dozens of files sealed in waterproof pouches, their contents preserved despite 80 years of storage. She carefully extracted the first pouch and opened it. Inside were papers marked Classified, Project Sentinel, Eyes Only, dated 1944, detailing something called the Pacific Theater Precious Metals Reserve Program. According to the documents, the U.S. Treasury had established secret platinum reserves to support aircraft manufacturing and munitions production in the Pacific. Rather than risk shipping through established channels where submarine attacks or internal theft posed constant threats, they'd hidden strategic reserves on otherwise ordinary cargo vessels. The Iron Duchess had been designated as Reserve Transport Vessel 17, carrying approximately $8 million in platinum ingots, $1,944, which meant the metal alone was worth exponentially more today. The documents included inventory lists, chain of custody records, and authorization signatures from Treasury officials whose names Rebecca recognized from history books. There was also a final memo, dated March 1945, ordering the compartment sealed and the vessel's classified cargo status revoked as the war drew to a close. The platinum was supposed to be offloaded at San Francisco and returned to Treasury reserves. But that clearly hadn't happened. Somehow, between that March 1945 order and the Iron Duchess's transition to civilian service, the hidden compartment and its contents had been forgotten. The ship had changed hands, been converted for commercial use, worked trade routes for 40 years, and eventually ended up abandoned in Portland, all while carrying a fortune that bureaucratic oversight had simply lost track of. Rebecca sat back, processing the implications. This wasn't just valuable cargo she'd stumbled across. This was documented government property with clear chain of custody showing it had never been properly decommissioned or returned, which meant someone could argue it still belonged to the federal government. She was photographing the documents when she heard footsteps on the deck above. Her watch showed 11:47. David was early. Rebecca climbed out of the cargo tank and found a man in his early 40s standing on the main deck, surveying the Iron Duchess with the expert eye of someone who evaluated vessels for a living. He'd aged well since college, still lean and fit, now carrying himself with the confidence of professional success. "Rebecca," he called out, spotting her emergence. "My God, you weren't kidding about the T2. This thing is magnificent." "David." She crossed the deck, hand extended. "Thanks for coming." They shook, and his grip was firm, assessing. "You look good. Tired but good. Life treating you well." "That's complicated," Rebecca admitted. "Thanks for making the drive. Wouldn't miss it. I've been fascinated by T2 tankers since Academy. The fact that you actually own one." He shook his head in admiration. "That's either brilliant or insane." "Probably both," Rebecca said. "Come on. I need to show you what I found." She led him down into the cargo tank, through the hidden panel, into the compartment that had remained sealed since 1945. David's professional composure cracked when he saw the boxes of platinum. "Holy shit," he breathed, moving closer to examine the ingots. "This is real. This is actual World War II Treasury platinum." 360 ingots, Rebecca said. Roughly $126 million at current market prices. David pulled out one of the ingots, checking the stamps, testing the weight. "The documentation? You found chain of custody records." Rebecca handed him the Sentinel files. He read in silence, his expression growing more serious with each page. "This is government property," he said finally. "Was government property. Should have been returned to the Treasury in 1945, but someone dropped the ball and it got forgotten." He looked up at her. "Rebecca, this is both the best and worst thing you could have found." "Explain." "Best because it's legally yours. You bought the vessel at legitimate auction, which transfers ownership of everything on board. The government had 80 years to track this down and failed. Courts generally don't look kindly on Uncle Sam showing up decades later claiming property they abandoned through their own negligence. And the worst is that $126 million in platinum is going to attract attention from people who think they deserve a share. The shipyard will want finder's fees. The government will explore every legal angle to reclaim it. Treasure hunters and speculators will come out of nowhere claiming they have documentation proving their entitlement. You're going to be fighting off claims from every direction." Rebecca had expected this, but hearing it stated so bluntly still made her stomach clench. "What do I do?" "You need 3 things immediately," David said, ticking them off on his fingers. "First, legal representation. Someone who specializes in maritime salvage law and government claims. Second, secure storage. You can't leave this platinum sitting on a derelict ship in a public shipyard. Third, documentation. Every single piece of paper you can generate proving your ownership and the cargo's provenance." "I have maybe $600 left," Rebecca said quietly. "I can't afford lawyers or secure storage facilities." David studied her for a long moment. "How desperate are you?" "I've been living in my sister's spare room for 2 months. Before that, my daughter and I slept in my car. I'm a marine engineer working dock inspections for $18 an hour because nobody will hire me for actual engineering work. So yeah, David, I'm pretty fucking desperate." He nodded slowly. "Then I have a proposal. My company does salvage recovery. We have the legal team, the secure facilities, the expertise to handle exactly this situation. We'll represent you, manage the extraction, negotiate with all the competing claims, and handle the sale of the platinum." "In exchange for what percentage?" "Standard salvage recovery is 30%, David said. "But given your circumstances and the fact that you found this yourself, I'd propose 20%. My company takes $25 million, you walk away with $100 million, and we handle everything." $25 million. The number was so absurd that Rebecca almost laughed. A week ago, she'd been worried about how to afford groceries, and now someone was offering to take $25 million, and she was supposed to negotiate for better terms. What if I want to handle it myself? She asked, testing. Then you're looking at minimum 6 months of legal battles, during which you'll need to secure the platinum at your own expense, hire your own lawyers, and fend off claims from parties with resources far exceeding yours. The shipyard alone could tie you up in court for years arguing they're entitled to salvage fees since the discovery happened on their property. It happened on my vessel, which was on their property, using their dock space, their security. Trust me, Rebecca, they'll have lawyers who make that argument very convincingly. She looked at the boxes of platinum, at the fortune that could solve every problem she'd ever had or could drag her into conflict she had no resources to fight. I need to think about it, she said finally. Of course. But Rebecca, David's voice was gentle. Don't think too long. The 90-day clock is ticking, and word will get out. It always does. Someone will notice you spending time on this vessel, will see you bringing equipment aboard, will get curious. Once that happens, your window for controlling the situation closes fast. They emerge from the cargo tank to find a man standing on the main deck, watching them with undisguised interest. He was mid-50s, wearing khaki work clothes and a shipyard supervisor's badge that identified him as Gerald Morrison. "Ms. Hart," he said, smiling with practiced friendliness that didn't reach his eyes. "Didn't realize you'd be bringing consultants aboard. Should have cleared that with the office first." "Mr. Chun is here at my invitation," Rebecca said carefully, "to assess the vessel's condition. Find anything interesting?" Morrison's gaze flicked between them, searching for tells. "Just rust and corrosion," David said smoothly. "Same as every derelict T2. Ms. Hart is evaluating whether salvage is economically viable or if she should just sell for scrap value." Morrison nodded, but something in his expression suggested he didn't quite believe them. "Well, just remember, anything of value found on shipyard property is subject to recovery fees per your contract. 20% finder's fee on any salvageable materials." "I'll keep that in mind," Rebecca said, keeping her voice neutral even as alarm bells rang in her head. She hadn't signed anything about finder's fees. Morrison was either fishing or already knew more than he should. After the supervisor left, David turned to her with serious eyes. "See what I mean? It's already starting. You need to make a decision fast, Rebecca. 48 hours, max, before too many people get interested." She spent that night at Amanda's apartment, unable to sleep, staring at the ceiling while Lily breathed softly in the sleeping bag beside her couch. $100 million. Even after David's company took their share, she'd have more money than she could spend in multiple lifetimes. Lily could go to any school she wanted. Rebecca could buy a house, a real house with a yard and Lily's own room and space to breathe. She could pursue engineering projects that interested her rather than taking whatever work paid bills. She could stop fighting just to survive and start actually living. But something about David's offer nagged at her. 20% seemed reasonable for the services his company would provide, but it also felt like she'd be giving away a fortune before she'd even try to fight for it herself. At 2 a.m., she pulled out her laptop and started researching maritime salvage law. The reading was dense, technical, filled with legal precedents she struggled to interpret, but certain principles emerged clearly. Finder's rights. The person who discovers abandoned property generally has superior claim to it. Salvage awards. Courts could grant salvage fees to parties who helped recover property, but those fees were typically calculated based on risk, effort, and value preserved. Government claims. The U.S. government could claim property that had never been properly transferred to private hands, but courts weighed government negligence heavily in such cases. The Iron Duchess had been legally sold at public auction. The platinum had been on board during that sale. Rebecca had purchased the vessel through legitimate channels, which meant she'd purchased everything affixed to or contained within it. Strong claim. Defensible position. But defending it would require resources she didn't have and expertise she'd need to acquire fast. She found a maritime law firm in Portland that specialized in salvage claims and treasure recovery. Their website showed successful cases against government seizures, shipyard liens, and competing claimants. She drafted an email requesting an urgent consultation, then hesitated before sending. Lawyers cost money. Money she didn't have until she could liquidate at least some of the platinum, which meant she needed to secure it first. Rebecca pulled up the shipyard security protocols, studying their procedures for vessel access and cargo handling. The Iron Duchess sat in a basin with limited surveillance. The shipyard's cameras focused on high-value areas where active work was happening, not on derelict vessels awaiting scrapping. If she could move the platinum off the ship without anyone noticing, she could secure it privately before word got out. But moving 360 ingots, each weighing 20 pounds, required equipment and time she might not have. And doing it secretly meant she couldn't hire professional movers or rent obvious equipment like cargo containers. The plan formed slowly over hours of research and calculation. She'd move the platinum in stages, using her truck to transport small loads late at night when the shipyard was minimally staffed. Store it temporarily in a commercial storage unit under a false name. Once secured, she'd engage the lawyers, establish her legal claim, and negotiate sale of the platinum from a position of actual possession rather than abstract ownership. It was risky. If caught, she could face theft charges even though the platinum was legally hers. If the storage unit was discovered, she'd lose everything. But was also the only path she could see that didn't involve giving away millions of dollars to David's company or risking legal battles that would drag on while the shipyard held her property hostage. At 7 a.m., she called David. "I appreciate your offer, but I'm going to handle this myself." His sigh carried disappointment, but not surprise. "Rebecca, please reconsider. The legal exposure alone. I'm a marine engineer who bought a ship nobody wanted and found something nobody expected. If I can do that, I can figure out how to protect what I found. But thank you, David. Really, for coming down, for the advice, for taking me seriously. If you change your mind, I'll call. I promise." She hung up before he could argue further. The next 48 hours blurred into frantic activity. Rebecca rented a storage unit in Gresham, paying cash, using a fake name and post office box. She bought heavy-duty plastic containers, moving blankets, and a hand truck. She mapped routes from the shipyard to the storage facility that avoided major traffic and security cameras. And she told Lily they were going on an adventure. "We're going to play secret agent," Rebecca explained Tuesday evening, kneeling to her daughter's level. "We're going to help Mama move some important things from the boat to a safe place, but it's a secret. Can you keep a secret?" Lily's eyes went wide with excitement. "Like spies. Exactly like spies. But real spies don't tell anyone what they're doing, even when people ask." "Can you do that?" "I can keep secrets," Lily promised solemnly. Amanda was working late shifts at the hospital all week, which gave Rebecca the cover she needed. She told her sister she was working on the vessel assessment, which was true if incomplete. The first extraction happened Tuesday night at 11 p.m. Rebecca parked her truck near the Iron Duchess, used her owner's access to bypass the main gate, and carried empty containers aboard. In the hidden compartment, working by flashlight, she carefully loaded 20 ingots into each container, 400 pounds per container, right at the limit of what she could move with the hand truck. Lily helped, treating it like the game Rebecca had framed it as, carefully wrapping each ingot in moving blankets, stacking them precisely in the containers. "These are really heavy, Mama." "What are they?" "Very special metal," Rebecca said, which was true. "Metal that's going to help us have a better life." They loaded 3 containers into the truck bed, covering them with a tarp. 60 ingots, roughly $21 million in platinum, secured with nothing more than rope and hope. The drive to Gresham took 40 minutes, Rebecca's heart hammering every time she saw headlights in her rearview mirror, certain that police would pull her over, that somehow everyone would know what she was transporting. But nobody stopped them. The storage facility was deserted at midnight, automated entry requiring only a code. She unloaded the containers into a 10 by 10 unit, locked the door, and drove back to the shipyard. They made 3 trips that night, moving 180 ingots total. Rebecca's back screamed in protest, her hands blistered from lifting, but she didn't stop. Each load was $21 million secured, $21 million that couldn't be seized by the shipyard or claimed by competitors. Lily fell asleep in the truck around 3 a.m., curled up in the passenger seat, while Rebecca made the final run of the night. By 4:30 a.m., they were back at Amanda's apartment, Rebecca carrying her exhausted daughter inside and tucking her into the sleeping bag before collapsing herself. She woke at noon to her phone buzzing insistently. 3 missed calls from the shipyard, 2 voicemails, 1 text. Ms. Hart, need to discuss your vessel access. Please call immediately. Rebecca's stomach clenched. They'd noticed something. Someone had seen her late-night activity or checked the vessel and found evidence of her work in the hidden compartment. She called back, trying to keep her voice steady. Morrison answered on the first ring. Ms. Hart, we've had reports of unauthorized nighttime access to your vessel. Our security logs show entry at 11:07 p.m. last night. Departure at 4:23 a.m. That's outside your approved access hours. I'm the owner, Rebecca said. I wasn't aware there were restricted hours. Standard shipyard policy for safety and security. Nighttime access requires advance authorization and on-site supervision. We need you to come to the office to discuss proper procedures. I'll stop by this afternoon, Rebecca promised, mind racing. They didn't know what she'd been doing, just that she'd been there. As long as the hidden compartment remained undiscovered, she could claim she was doing assessment work. But Morrison's next words made her blood run cold. We'll also need to discuss our discovery clause. Legal reviewed your purchase contract, and any materials of value found on vessels in our yard are subject to partnership terms. 20% to the finder, 20% to the shipyard, remainder to the owner. We'll need to inventory whatever you found before you can remove anything further. Partnership terms. 40% gone before she'd even established full legal claim. Rebecca forced herself to sound confused rather than alarmed. I haven't found anything of particular value. Just doing structural assessment. Ms. Hart, we have cameras. Not everywhere, but some locations. We saw you loading containers into your truck. Heavy containers, based on how your vehicle sat on its suspension. Now, you can work with us cooperatively, or we can involve authorities for possible theft of shipyard property. Your choice. The threat was clear. Cooperate and lose 40%, or fight and risk criminal charges. Rebecca took a breath, steadying herself. I'll come to the office at 2 p.m. But Mr. Morrison, whatever I remove from my vessel is my property. The purchase contract transferred ownership of the Iron Duchess and all contents. If your legal team disagrees, we can let our respective attorneys argue it out. She hung up before he could respond. Amanda came home at 1:30 p.m., found Rebecca frantically packing bags. What's happening? We need to leave, Rebecca said. Now. Today. Leave? Becky, what did you do? I found something valuable on the ship. Really valuable. And now people who think they deserve a share are circling. I need to secure what I've already moved and get Lily somewhere safe before this gets worse. How valuable are we talking about? Rebecca met her sister's eyes. Over $100 million valuable. Amanda sat down hard on the couch, face pale. You're joking. I wish I was. It's platinum. World War II Treasury reserves that got forgotten when the ship changed hands. Legally mine, but everyone's going to fight me for it. $100 million, Amanda repeated, like the number didn't compute. Becky, that's insane. That's world-changing money. I know, which is why I need to protect it and protect Lily before people get desperate. What about me? Amanda's voice was small. What am I supposed to do while you're running off with platinum worth more than small countries? Rebecca paused in her packing. Come with us. Help me fight this. Once it's secured and legal, I'll take care of you, Amanda. Everything you've done for us, every month you let us stay here, every time you covered groceries when I couldn't, I'll make it right. I don't want charity. It's not charity. It's family. It's partnership. Come with us. Amanda looked at Lily, who'd woken from her nap and was watching the adults with wide, worried eyes. Where would we even go? Montana, Rebecca said, the plan forming as she spoke. I have a friend from Academy who runs a private storage facility in Billings. Secure, discreet, no questions asked. We move the platinum there, hire lawyers from outside Portland who aren't connected to any local interests, and fight from a position where the assets are protected. This is crazy, Amanda said. But she stood up and started packing her own bag. They loaded Rebecca's truck with everything essential: clothes, documents, Lily's favorite books, and toys. The storage unit in Gresham held 180 ingots, roughly $63 million. Another 180 remained on the Iron Duchess, still hidden but vulnerable now that Morrison knew something was there. Rebecca made one more run to the shipyard at 5 p.m., timing it for shift change when security would be distracted. She parked far from the Iron Duchess, approached on foot, and found what she'd feared. Morrison's SUV parked near the vessel, lights on in the cargo hold where the hidden compartment was located. They found it. They were cataloging the remaining platinum right now. Rebecca pulled out her phone and called the maritime law firm she'd researched. A receptionist answered, professional and polite. Hart and Morrison Maritime Law. How may I direct your call? I need to speak with an attorney immediately about a salvage claim dispute. This is urgent. We're talking over $100 million in found property that's currently being seized illegally. Please hold. 2 minutes later, a voice came on the line. This is Patricia Morrison. You said something about a $100 million salvage claim. Rebecca explained rapidly. The purchase, the discovery, the shipyard's attempt to claim partnership rights, the platinum currently being inventoried without her consent. Patricia listened without interrupting, then said crisply, "Do you have documentation proving your ownership of the vessel?" "Yes. Full title, purchase records, everything." "And you discovered this platinum in a compartment that was part of the ship's structure when you purchased it?" "Yes." "Then legally, it's yours. The shipyard has no claim beyond standard dock fees for the space you're using. I can file for an emergency injunction within the hour preventing them from removing or claiming any materials from your vessel." "Where are you right now?" "At the shipyard, watching them inventory my property. Do not engage them directly. Go somewhere public, somewhere with witnesses. I'll meet you at the downtown Starbucks in 45 minutes with preliminary paperwork. We're going to shut this down before it gets worse." Rebecca drove to the Starbucks, Amanda and Lily following in Amanda's car. They claimed a corner table, and Rebecca bought coffee she was too nervous to drink. Patricia Morrison arrived exactly on time. A woman in her 50s with silver hair and the bearing of someone who'd spent decades fighting legal battles and winning more than she lost. She sat down across from Rebecca with a briefcase that looked expensive and said simply, "Tell me everything." Rebecca told her about the auction, the discovery, the documentation from the Sentinel files, the platinum's provenance, David's offer, Morrison's threats, the 180 ingots she'd already secured in Gresham. Patricia took notes, asked clarifying questions, and finally sat back with an expression that was equal parts impressed and concerned. "You have a solid legal claim," she said. "The vessel was legally purchased, the platinum was aboard during that purchase, and government documentation shows it was never properly recovered or decommissioned. Courts will almost certainly rule in your favor. But you're going to face challenges from multiple directions. The shipyard will argue for finder's fees. The federal government will explore claiming it as abandoned treasury property. Private salvage companies will offer to help in exchange for percentages. You need to be prepared for a fight that could last months." "I'm prepared," Rebecca said. "What do I do first?" "First, we file the injunction preventing the shipyard from claiming or removing any materials from your vessel. Second, we establish secure storage for the platinum you've already moved, legal, documented storage that can't be challenged. Third, we send notice to the U.S. Treasury that you've recovered their lost property and are prepared to negotiate return under the finder's fee statute." "Finder's fee statute?" Patricia smiled slightly. "Federal law provides compensation to citizens who find and return lost government property. For items this valuable, that compensation is typically 25% of assessed value. So if the Treasury wants their $126 million in platinum back, they owe you roughly $31 million as finder's fee." Rebecca's head spun. "They'd actually pay me to return property they lost? They'd pay you to avoid the embarrassment of a very public trial about how they lost track of $126 million in strategic reserves. Trust me, the Treasury will negotiate. They always do when the alternative is congressional hearings about bureaucratic incompetence. And the rest? The 75%. Return to the Treasury, where it should have been 80 years ago, but you walk away with $31 million for being smart enough to find what they'd lost. Plus potentially keeping the 180 ingots you've already secured if we can argue they constitute separate salvage from the main Treasury claim. Rebecca did the math quickly. 31 million guaranteed, plus possibly another 63 million if they could structure the legal argument correctly. 94 million total. Far less than the full $126 million, but far more than she'd ever dreamed possible a week ago. Do it, she said. File everything. Let's make this legal and defensible. Patricia pulled documents from her briefcase. I'll need a retainer. $20,000 to start. More as the case develops. Rebecca's stomach clenched. I don't have $20,000. I have maybe $500 to my name. What about the platinum you've already secured? I can't sell it until we establish legal claim. Patricia considered this, then made a decision that would change everything. I'll work on contingency. 15% of whatever we secure for you, paid after settlement. But Rebecca, I need you to be completely honest with me about everything. Every decision you've made, every risk you've taken, every questionable choice. Because if this goes to trial, they'll investigate every aspect of your life and use anything they find against you. Rebecca glanced at Lily, who was coloring at the next table, oblivious to the conversation determining her future. Then she looked at Amanda, who gave a small nod of encouragement. I made a lot of questionable choices, Rebecca admitted. Desperate choices. But I found something that was legally mine, and I'm fighting to keep it. That's the truth. Then let's fight, Patricia said, extending her hand. They shook on it, and Rebecca felt the first real hope she'd experienced in years. Not the desperate hope of lottery tickets or miracle jobs, but the solid hope of legal standing and professional representation and an actual path forward. The war for the Iron Duchess's treasure had begun in earnest. And for the first time since that auction notification had chimed on her phone, Rebecca believed she might actually win. The injunction came through at 8:47 p.m. that same evening. Patricia called with the news while Rebecca sat in a budget-in motel room with Amanda and Lily, all three of them crammed onto one bed, eating takeout Chinese food that tasted like cardboard in relief. Judge Hendricks granted the emergency order, Patricia said, satisfaction evident in her voice. The shipyard is legally prohibited from removing, claiming, or inventorying any materials from the Iron Duchess without your express written consent. I've already sent copies to Morrison and the shipyard's legal team. They're furious, but they'll comply. What happens next? Rebecca asked, watching Lily play with her fortune cookie wrapper, blissfully unaware that her mother was fighting for more money than most people saw in 10 lifetimes. Tomorrow, we file formal notice with the U.S. Treasury. I've drafted a letter explaining that you've discovered their lost platinum reserves and are prepared to return them under the federal finder's fee statute. That starts a 90-day negotiation window, during which Treasury has to either accept your terms or file suit challenging your claim. And if they file suit, then we go to trial and make them explain to a federal judge how they lost track of $126 million in strategic reserves for 80 years. Trust me, Rebecca, they won't want that publicity. They'll negotiate. After the call ended, Rebecca lay awake while Amanda and Lily slept beside her, staring at the motel ceiling and processing everything that had happened in 72 hours. She'd gone from desperate single mother to owner of a fortune so large she couldn't quite conceptualize it. But the fight was far from over. The shipyard would push back. The Treasury would lowball their initial offer. And somewhere out there, other people who thought they deserved a share were probably already hiring lawyers. The next morning brought the first salvo. Morrison's legal team filed a counterclaim asserting that the shipyard held legitimate salvage rights to any valuable materials discovered on vessels using their facilities. They cited maritime precedent, argued that Rebecca had used shipyard resources and security to access the vessel, and demanded either 40% of the platinum's value or $50 million, whichever was greater. Patricia's response was swift and brutal. She filed documentation showing that Rebecca had purchased the Iron Duchess at public auction, that the auction terms included full ownership of the vessel and contents, and that no salvage rights had been reserved by the shipyard. She also filed a countersuit demanding $100,000 in damages for the shipyard's illegal attempt to seize private property. "We're playing hardball now," Patricia explained during a conference call that afternoon. "Morrison thought you'd be easy to intimidate because you don't have resources. He's learning that having the law on your side matters more than having money." But money mattered too, Rebecca was learning. Each filing, each motion, each hour of Patricia's time added to legal costs that were mounting rapidly despite the contingency arrangement. And the 180 ingots sitting in a storage unit in Gresham needed to be moved somewhere more secure before word spread about their existence. "I need to liquidate some of the platinum," Rebecca told Patricia. "Just enough to cover immediate expenses and secure proper storage for the rest." "Can I do that legally?" "Technically, yes, it's your property. But I'd advise waiting until Treasury responds. If you start selling platinum before they've had a chance to assess their claim, it looks like you're trying to dispose of evidence." "I'm trying to survive." "There's a difference." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "How bad is your financial situation?" "I have $300 left. I'm staying in a motel that costs $60 a night. I have a daughter to feed and a sister who took time off work to help me. I can't wait 90 days for Treasury to decide whether they want to negotiate." "Okay," Patricia said, making a decision. "Here's what we do. We select 5 ingots, roughly $1.75 million worth. We document them extensively, photograph serial numbers, establish clear provenance. Then we sell them through a reputable precious metals dealer who can verify authenticity and provide legal receipts for the transaction. That gives you operating capital while preserving the bulk of the find for final settlement. Who's going to buy $1.75 million in platinum from someone with no credentials? Leave that to me. I know dealers who work with estate liquidations and unusual acquisitions. They'll authenticate, purchase, and document everything properly. You'll have cash in hand within a week." The transaction happened faster than Rebecca expected. Patricia connected her with a Portland metals dealer named Marcus Webb, who specialized in high-value precious metal transactions. He met them at a secure facility on Thursday afternoon, bringing equipment to test the platinum's purity and authenticity. Rebecca had brought 5 ingots from the Gresham storage unit, each one carefully documented with photographs showing the Treasury stamps and serial numbers. Marcus examined them with the careful attention of someone who'd spent a career evaluating valuable metals. .9995 purity, he confirmed after testing the first ingot. "Treasury stamps are authentic. I can verify the style and marks against historical records. These are legitimate World War II reserves." He tested all 5 ingots, then made an offer, $1.6 million for the lot. That's slightly below market rate, but it accounts for the authentication time and potential complications from the provenance. Rebecca wanted to negotiate, to argue for the full $1.75 million, but Patricia caught her eye and gave a subtle head shake. "We'll accept," Patricia said, "pending your verification of authenticity and proper documentation of the sale. Of course, I'll need 3 days to complete authentication and arrange bank transfers." "Will that work?" It had to work. Rebecca shook his hand, feeling the weight of what she'd just done. She'd sold 5 pieces of metal for more money than she'd earned in the past 5 years combined. The bank transfer hit her account on Sunday morning, $1,600,000, making her account balance look like a phone number with too many digits. Rebecca sat in the motel room, staring at her phone screen, trying to process that the money was real, that she could actually access it, spend it, use it to solve problems that had seemed insurmountable a week ago. "Mama," Lily appeared at her elbow, curious. "Why are you crying?" Rebecca hadn't realized tears were streaming down her face. "Happy crying, baby. We're going to be okay. Better than okay." The first thing she did was move them out of the motel. She rented a furnished apartment in a secure building in Northwest Portland. 3 bedrooms, updated kitchen, floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the city. The lease required first month, last month, and security deposit, which came to $9,000. Rebecca paid it without hesitation, feeling something loosen in her chest that had been tight for years. Lily got her own room for the first time since the divorce. Rebecca bought her a bed, a desk, bookshelves, everything a 10-year-old needed to feel like she had space that was truly hers. Watching her daughter arrange stuffed animals on new shelves, humming while she organized books, made every risk Rebecca had taken feel worthwhile. Amanda took the third bedroom, though she insisted she'd only stay temporarily. "You don't owe me this," she said, standing in the doorway of a room larger than her entire apartment. "I owe you everything," Rebecca corrected. "You took us in when we had nowhere else to go. You fed us, supported us, put up with me chasing crazy dreams. This isn't charity, Amanda. This is me making things right." The Treasury's response came on the 15th day after Patricia's initial notice. A formal letter from the Department of Treasury's Office of Asset Recovery acknowledged receipt of Rebecca's claim and requested a meeting to discuss terms of return and appropriate compensation for recovery efforts. Patricia read the letter over the phone, translating bureaucratic language into plain terms. They're going to negotiate. This phrase, appropriate compensation, means they're prepared to pay finders fees rather than fight in court. We have leverage. The meeting was scheduled for the following Wednesday in Washington, D.C. Patricia would attend as Rebecca's representative, but she recommended Rebecca come as well. Putting a face to the claim matters. You're not some treasure hunter or salvage company. You're a single mother who bought a derelict ship and found something extraordinary. That narrative plays well. Rebecca had never been to Washington. She'd barely been outside the Pacific Northwest. But she bought plane tickets for herself, and Patricia arranged for Amanda to watch Lily and flew across the country to fight for what she'd found. The Treasury building was exactly what she'd expected: imposing, historic, intimidating in the way government architecture is designed to remind citizens of the state's power. Patricia met her in the lobby, carrying a briefcase that contained copies of every document supporting their claim. "Remember," Patricia said as they went through security, "we're negotiating from strength. They lost this platinum. We found it. The law is on our side. Don't let them intimidate you into accepting less than we deserve." The conference room on the third floor held 4 people from Treasury, 2 lawyers, an asset recovery specialist, and a deputy director whose title suggested she had actual decision-making authority. They introduced themselves with practiced formality, then got straight to business. "Ms. Hart," the deputy director began, "we've reviewed your claim regarding Treasury Platinum reserves discovered on the vessel you purchased. We appreciate your cooperation in bringing this matter to our attention rather than attempting to liquidate the assets privately." Rebecca didn't mention the 5 ingots she'd already sold. Neither did Patricia. "The Treasury is prepared to offer compensation for recovery of our property," the deputy director continued. "Standard finder's fee for items of this nature is 10% of assessed value. Given the platinum's current market price of approximately $126 million, we're authorized to offer you $12.6 million for complete return of all ingots and associated documentation." Patricia didn't even pause. Federal Statute 31 U.S.C. 3723 establishes finder's fees for lost government property at 25% of assessed value, not 10. And that's for ordinary lost property. This platinum wasn't just lost. It was abandoned through bureaucratic negligence for 80 years while your department paid storage and security costs for empty vaults. Our counteroffer is 35%, $44.1 million, plus retention of any ingots Ms. Hart has already secured as separate salvage from the main find. One of the Treasury lawyers leaned forward. "Ms. Hart has already liquidated some of the platinum? That could constitute disposal of government property." Ms. Hart liquidated 5 ingots from the 180 she personally salvaged and secured before your department even knew they existed, Patricia shot back. "Those ingots constitute separate salvage under maritime law, property that would have remained lost without her specific recovery efforts. The remaining 175 ingots from that salvage, plus the 180 still aboard the vessel, represent the main find we're discussing today." The negotiation lasted 4 hours. Treasury argued that their initial loss of the platinum didn't constitute abandonment, just administrative oversight. Patricia countered with documentation showing 80 years of failure to track strategic reserves, multiple audits that should have caught the discrepancy, and bureaucratic incompetence that bordered on negligence. They haggled over percentages, disputed assessment values, argued about what constituted salvage versus recovery. Rebecca sat quietly through most of it, watching Patricia dismantle Treasury's arguments with the precision of someone who'd spent decades in maritime law. Finally, the deputy director called for a recess. The Treasury team left the room for 30 minutes, then returned with a revised offer. 28% of assessed value, $35.28 million, for return of all platinum currently aboard the Iron Duchess. Ms. Hart retains the 175 ingots she personally salvaged as compensation for recovery efforts. That's our final offer. Patricia looked at Rebecca, eyebrows raised in a silent question. Rebecca did quick mental math. $35 million plus the value of 175 platinum ingots, roughly $61 million worth. Added to the $1.6 million from the 5 already sold, she'd walk away with approximately $97 million total. Far less than the full $126 million, but far more than she'd ever imagined possible when she'd placed that $500 bid. "We accept," Rebecca said, before Patricia could negotiate further. The Treasury lawyers began preparing paperwork immediately. Patricia leaned close to Rebecca and whispered, "I could have pushed for more." "I know," Rebecca whispered back. "But $97 million is enough. More than enough. Let's close this before something goes wrong." The formal agreement took another week to finalize. Legal teams drafted contracts, established transfer protocols, arranged secure transport for the platinum still aboard the Iron Duchess. The Treasury insisted on testing and documenting every ingot before payment, which meant Rebecca had to grant them access to both the vessel and her secured storage. She returned to Portland while lawyers handled the details, focusing instead on the immediate problem of what to do with the Iron Duchess herself. The vessel had served its purpose, delivered her fortune, and changed her life, but now it was just 523 feet of rusted metal taking up space in a shipyard that wanted gone. Rebecca could have sold it for scrap. The steel alone was worth maybe $200,000. But standing on the deck one final time, running her hand along the rail that had survived 80 years of service, she couldn't bring herself to consign it to a cutting torch. She called the Maritime Museum of the Pacific Northwest and spoke to their director, a woman named Dr. Sarah Chun, who specialized in World War II naval history. "You're serious?" Dr. Chun said, after Rebecca explained her offer. "You want to donate the Iron Duchess to the museum?" "She's historically significant," Rebecca said. "One of the last intact T2 tankers with a story worth preserving. I'll cover the cost of moving her to your facility and basic stabilization work. In exchange, you preserve her history and the story of what was found aboard her." "Ms. Hart, do you have any idea what it costs to maintain a vessel that size?" "I have some idea, which is why I'm also establishing an endowment fund, $5 million, to cover maintenance and preservation costs. All I ask is that you tell the complete story. The ship, the war, the lost platinum, everything." Dr. Chun was quiet for a long moment. "I'll need to discuss this with our board, but yes, absolutely yes. This is an extraordinary gift." The money from Treasury arrived in 2 installments. The first, $35.28 million, hit Rebecca's account on a Tuesday morning in March. The second, payment for the 175 retained ingots that Rebecca sold through Marcus Webb's firm, came 2 weeks later, $61.25 million. Total proceeds, $96.53 million after selling costs and fees. Patricia's contingency fee came to $14.48 million, leaving Rebecca with $82.05 million. More money than she could spend in multiple lifetimes. More money than seemed real. But the fight wasn't quite finished. Morrison and the shipyard had appealed the initial injunction, arguing that they deserved salvage fees for providing the facilities where the discovery occurred. Their lawyers pushed for a trial, convinced they could win a percentage through sheer persistence. Patricia's advice was simple: settle. Offer them a nuisance payment, enough that continuing to fight costs more than accepting, and close this door permanently. Rebecca authorized a settlement offer of $500,000. Morrison's lawyers countered at $2 million. They settled at $1.2 million, paid with a contract stipulating that the shipyard waived all future claims related to the Iron Duchess or any materials discovered aboard. Morrison called personally to accept the settlement, his voice tight with the particular frustration of someone who'd lost a battle they thought they'd win. "You got lucky, Miss Hart. Extremely lucky. Luck had nothing to do with it," Rebecca said calmly. "I bought a ship nobody wanted, found what everyone else missed, and fought to keep what was legally mine. That's not luck. That's perseverance." She hung up before he could respond, feeling a satisfaction that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with proving she'd been right when everyone said she was crazy. The final loose end was David Chun, the salvage expert who'd offered to take 20% in exchange for handling everything. He called in April, after news of the Treasury settlement went public. "Congratulations," he said, sounding genuinely pleased. "I heard you did well." "Better than I expected," Rebecca admitted. "Thank you for the initial advice, David. Even though I didn't take your offer, your guidance helped me understand what I was dealing with. No regrets about handling it yourself?" "None. I learned things about myself I wouldn't have learned if I'd handed everything over to someone else. Plus, I get to keep $82 million instead of $100 million minus your company's cut." David laughed. "Fair point. Listen, I'm calling because my firm has a position opening, senior maritime engineer focused on salvage assessment and recovery operations. 60% travel, competitive salary, benefits, stock options. I know you've got more money than you need now, but the job isn't about the salary. It's about using your skills on projects that matter." Rebecca was quiet, processing the offer. A week ago, she would have jumped at the opportunity: legitimate engineering work, professional respect, a career that utilized her education and experience. But things were different now. "I appreciate the offer," she said carefully, "but I'm actually starting my own venture. Maritime consulting focused on vessel assessment and hidden space detection. I've learned more about T2 tanker construction in the past 2 months than most engineers learn careers. Figured I'd put that knowledge to work." "Seriously? You're going into business?" "Why not? I've got the capital to fund it properly, the expertise to do it well, and motivation to help other people find what's been overlooked. Plus, I can work my own schedule, which matters when you have a 10-year-old daughter." "Well," David said, respect evident in his voice, "if you ever need a partner or consultant on projects, call me. What you accomplished, finding that platinum, fighting off all the competing claims, securing the settlement, that's the kind of creative problem-solving the industry needs." After the call ended, Rebecca sat in her new apartment, looking out at the Portland skyline and thinking about the future she was building. Not just for herself, but for Lily. She'd set up trust funds, $20 million for Lily's education, future, and security. Another $10 million for Amanda, structured to provide income for life without requiring her to work a hospital job she'd only taken for insurance. $5 million for the museum endowment. $1 million donated to a scholarship fund for single mothers pursuing STEM degrees. That left her with roughly $46 million for her consulting business, investments, and life expenses. Enough to be comfortable without being obscene. Enough to make a difference without losing perspective. Lily burst into the room, home from school, backpack bouncing on her shoulders. "Mama, guess what? My science teacher says we can do a project on anything we want, and I want to do mine on how ships are built. Can you help me?" Rebecca pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and youth and possibility. "Of course I can help you. What do you want to know?" "Everything," Lily said, with the confident enthusiasm of a child who believed the world was knowable and adventure was waiting around every corner. "I want to know how they build them, how they float, how they survive storms. And I want to know about the treasure ship, the one you found. Can I tell my class about that?" "You can tell them anything you want," Rebecca said. "It's your story too, baby. You were there for all of it." That evening, After Lily fell asleep in her own room in her own bed in the apartment that was finally, truly home, Rebecca returned to the living room where Amanda sat reading. "I've been thinking," Amanda said, setting down her book, "about what comes next. For me." Rebecca settled onto the couch beside her sister. "You can stay here as long as you want. You know that." "I know, but maybe I don't want to stay." Amanda smiled slightly. "You chased your crazy dream, and it worked out. Maybe it's time I chase mine." "Which is?" "Nursing school. Real nursing, not just the CNA work I've been doing. I always wanted to be an RN, but I couldn't afford school and couldn't risk the time away from work. But now," she gestured around the apartment, "now I have options." "Then do it," Rebecca said immediately. "I'll cover tuition, living expenses, everything. Considerate payment for all the times you covered me." They talked late into the night, planning futures that had seemed impossible a month ago. Amanda would start nursing school in the fall. Rebecca would launch her consulting business, taking on vessel assessment projects that let her use her engineering skills without sacrificing time with Lily. They'd stay in Portland for now. It was home, and uprooting seemed unnecessary when they'd finally found stability. The Iron Duchess was towed to the Maritime Museum in late May. Rebecca attended the ceremony, watching the massive tanker make its final voyage to a dock where it would be preserved as a memorial to World War II maritime service and as testament to the fact that sometimes what everyone else overlooks is exactly what you need to find. Dr. Chun gave a speech about the vessel's historical significance, about the role T2 tankers played in winning the war, about the extraordinary discovery of Treasury platinum that had been lost for 8 decades. And she invited Rebecca to speak. Standing before a crowd of museum donors, maritime historians, and news reporters, Rebecca talked about buying a ship for $500 because she was desperate enough to take a chance nobody else would risk. About using her engineering knowledge to find what shouldn't exist. About fighting to keep what was legally hers when powerful institutions try to take it. "The Iron Duchess taught me something important," Rebecca said, looking at the rusted hull that towered behind her. "That value isn't always obvious. That what looks broken might be hiding something extraordinary. And that sometimes the best thing you can do is bet on yourself when everyone else tells you you're wrong." Lily watched from the front row, sitting between Amanda and Patricia Morrison, the lawyer who'd made Rebecca's fight possible. When Rebecca finished speaking and the applause died down, Lily ran up to hug her. "I'm proud of you, Mama," she whispered. "I'm proud of us," Rebecca corrected. "We did this together." 6 months after finding the platinum, Rebecca's consulting business was thriving. She'd taken on 3 major projects: assessing a 1950s cargo vessel in Seattle, evaluating a mothballed freighter in San Diego, and consulting on a submarine restoration in Boston. The work was challenging, intellectually engaging, and paid extremely well even though she didn't need the money. But it wasn't about money anymore. It was about proving that she belonged in this industry, that her skills mattered, that the years of struggle had built expertise rather than just grinding her down. Amanda graduated from nursing school in May, passing her RN boards on the first attempt. She took a position at OHSU working pediatric oncology, hard work that mattered, patient care that made a difference. She moved into her own apartment, but came over for dinner twice a week, becoming part of Lily's life in ways that went beyond obligation. And Lily thrived. She joined the school science club, discovered a passion for marine biology, talked constantly about maybe becoming an engineer like her mother, or maybe a marine biologist, or maybe something else entirely, because the world was full of possibilities and she had time to explore them all. On the anniversary of the auction, exactly 1 year after Rebecca had placed a $500 bid on a ship everyone else had written off, she took Lily back to the Maritime Museum to see the Iron Duchess. The vessel looked different now, still imposing, still bearing the scars of age and service, but preserved rather than abandoned. Museum staff had stabilized the structure, cleaned the deck, installed lighting that highlighted the ship's lines and history rather than its decay. An exhibit inside told the complete story. The T2 program, the Iron Duchess's wartime service, the lost platinum reserves, Rebecca's discovery, the legal battle, the settlement with Treasury. Photos showed the hidden compartment, the platinum ingots, the documentation that had made the find possible. And in the center of the exhibit sat a single platinum ingot, loaned by Rebecca, with a placard explaining its significance. Lily read the placard aloud, tracing the words with her finger. World War II Treasury Platinum, discovered by Rebecca Hart aboard the T2 tanker Iron Duchess, 2024. One of 360 ingots hidden in a sealed compartment and forgotten for 80 years. Ms. Hart's discovery and successful recovery represent the largest private find of government property in U.S. maritime history. Mama, do you ever wish you kept all of it? Lily asked. All the platinum, not just the part you got to keep? Rebecca thought about that question, about the $126 million she could have fought for versus the $82 million she'd actually kept, about the battles she could have waged versus the settlement she'd accepted. No, she said honestly, what we have is more than enough, more than I ever dreamed possible. Fighting for every dollar would have taken years and cost us time we can't get back. I'd rather spend that time with you, building something meaningful, than fighting in court over money we don't need. They walked around the exhibit together, Rebecca explaining technical details about ship construction, about how she'd found the hidden compartment, about the moment she'd realized what those metal ingots actually were. Other museum visitors recognized her. The story had been covered extensively in news media, and Rebecca's face had become familiar through interviews and press conferences. Some asked for photos. Others just nodded with respect, acknowledging what she'd accomplished. As they left the museum, Lily asked, would you do it again? If you could go back, knowing everything that would happen. Rebecca looked back at the Iron Duchess, at the vessel that had changed everything, at the rusted hull that had been hiding a fortune everyone else had overlooked. Every time, she said, I'd do it again every single time. Because Rebecca Hart had learned something that money couldn't buy and success couldn't teach. That sometimes the floor gives way beneath your feet, not to destroy you, but to reveal what's been waiting below all along. That the things everyone calls worthless often hold the most value. And that the craziest risk you can take is exactly the one that changes everything. The Iron Duchess had given her more than platinum. It had given her proof that she'd been right to hope, right to fight, right to believe that she deserved better than the hand life had dealt her. And that was worth more than any amount of metal, any sum in her bank account, any treasure hidden in the dark. As they drove home through Portland streets, Lily chattering about her upcoming science project and Amanda texting about dinner plans, Rebecca felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not the peace of having no problems, but the peace of knowing that whatever came next, she could handle it. She bought a ship for $500 and found $126 million in platinum. But more importantly, she'd found herself. The engineer who saw possibilities others missed. The mother who fought for her daughter's future. The woman who refused to accept that her story was already written. The Iron Duchess sat in Portland Harbor, preserved and honored, a monument to what determination could accomplish when paired with expertise and courage. And Rebecca Hart drove through the city she'd nearly left, headed toward an apartment that was finally home, carrying with her the certain knowledge that sometimes the best inheritance isn't money or property. Sometimes it's the strength to see value where others see nothing, to fight when others surrender, and to believe that what's buried beneath the surface is worth digging for, no matter how deep you have to go. The tanker everyone said was worthless had held a fortune, and the woman everyone had underestimated had claimed it. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.